Well, hi everyone. Welcome to the Crossings online service. My name is Andrew, and I'm so glad you're joining with us today. Now, years ago, when I was a student, I was at best average. I mean, in middle school, I got a few B's, but mostly C's. High school was more of the same. In fact, the college I went to for my first 2 years out of high school was Illinois State University, or ISU. But the nickname everyone gave that school was I Screwed Up, because it was just a school that accepted anyone. So my freshman year of college, I had kind of come to grips with the fact that I'm just not a very good student. I'm not very school smart, and maybe I'm not that good at taking tests. I thought of myself as just an average student at best. But one day, all of that changed. I was sitting in my freshman year biology class. I was sitting near the back of the class because, well, that's what not great students do. And I was half paying attention to the lecture, half not, when the teacher said something as they were writing on the board, and they said, hey, you need to write this on your next paper. Well, the thing that she wrote on the board, I couldn't really read from where I was sitting because I was in the back. So she moved on, but I knew I needed to read what was on the board and couldn't see it. So I reached in my bag and I pulled out my glasses. Now you have to understand, this was the late 90s. Wearing glasses wasn't cool then. And I'd been diagnosed by an eye doctor years ago as being nearsighted, but come on, I never wore my glasses. In fact, I don't even know how they ended up in my bag that day. But they were in there, so I pulled them out and I put them on for really the first time ever. And I kid you not, it was like the entire world came alive. There were all of these shapes that were out of focus for me, and they became crystal clear. I could actually, for the very first time, see the board in the front of the class. And I realized in that moment, oh my gosh, everyone else sees like this every single day. You see, I had assumed everyone saw what I saw, but in an instant, everything changed. You see, on that day, I learned seeing changes everything. And this is true everywhere. Recently, I came across a story. I can't prove that this story is true, but hear me on this. I've done research, and while I can't prove it's 100% true, it is, I believe, accurate. So years ago, there was a resolution brought to the UN, and it was a humanitarian crisis affecting a South American country. It involved a famine, a drought, and a lot of refugees. Now, the UN heard all the stats and how lives would be impacted by this crisis, how refugees would suffer if they didn't step in. But because the UN constantly hears about lots of crises, they have limited resources. And it looked as if this, resolution was going to fail and there would be no relief provided for those people in need. Now, that's the part of the story I can't prove because there's no way to know exactly how that vote would have gone. But there was a nonprofit leading the way in that crisis. And so before the vote, this nonprofit, they brought in these VR headsets. You know what I'm talking about? Where the virtual reality. And they had each UN delegate see and experience what a refugee was seeing on the ground right then. You see, this nonprofit had created a day-in-the-life program of a refugee in that country. And so over the next couple of hours, each delegate saw and experienced the hardship, the pain, and the suffering that each refugee experienced every single day. And then it came time for the vote. And 100% of the UN delegates voted for relief. Why? Because seeing changes everything. And today, we're going to see that in our story. We're continuing our series called Generations. And today, we are going to meet the God who sees. So, if you have a Bible, I want you to turn to the book of Genesis. We've been looking at a couple in the book of Genesis. Their names are Abram and Sarai. They will eventually become known as Abraham and Sarah, and their story begins in Genesis 12, where God says to Abram, he says, I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all people on earth will be blessed through you. See, God says, I have a plan to bless you so that you will be a blessing to all people. And then in Genesis 15, just a few chapters later, God comes to Abram again, and he gives him the promise of a son. He tells Abram that you will have a child. In fact, in Genesis 15, verse 5, God has Abram look up at the stars, and God says to Abram, he says, look up at the sky and count the stars, if indeed you can count them. Then he said to him, so shall your offspring be. God says this blessing is going to be a child, the start of a great nation, a group of people who are going to bring light into the dark world in which we live. And then, fast forward to Genesis 21, we see Sarah became pregnant and bore a son to Abram in his old age, which is great because God always keeps his promise. And last week, we actually talked about this child, Isaac. But today, what I want to do is I want to look at the gap between Genesis 15 and Genesis 21. 6 chapters in our Bible, but it is a 25-year gap from Abram and Sarai. 25 years where they wonder, will God keep his word? Does God keep his promise? And maybe you've asked that question in your life recently. Maybe you felt led to leave a job and you went out and started your own business, but it's been hard, harder than you thought. The funding isn't there. All the doors that looked so open before now feel closed. And you're confused because you thought, man, I really thought God was calling me to this. But now you're not so sure. Or maybe you felt called to move out to Orange County after college. And, you graduated and you had this sense God is moving you out here. So you stepped out in faith. But now that you're here, rent is crazy. The people aren't as friendly as you hoped. And you're wondering, did God really lead me to the right place? See, right there, you're in the gap. In fact, there's this great book out there. It's a little older now, but it's called The Land Between. The author is a pastor by the name of Jeff Mannion. And he talks about the gap between what God promises and when God meets that promise, what God does. He talks about how it's the place where faith, it gets tested. And so that's where we are today. So if you have your Bibles, I want to encourage you to jump to Genesis 16 because we're going to talk about this gap, this 25-year period of time where they wonder, can you trust God? Let's jump in with verse 1. It starts this way. It says, now Sarai, Abram's wife, had borne him no children. Okay, so here we see the facts of the story. God has promised Abram and Sarah a child, but the years go by and there's no kid. Now, if we read it too quick, we're going to miss this. But back then, obviously, there was no Social Security, no 401ks, no retirement funds. So for couples back then, it was their children who would provide for them as they age. So there was just this general belief in the ancient world that a couple with kids was blessed and a couple without kids, it's not just that they weren't blessed, but they were actually seen as cursed. So for Abram and Sarai, as the years go by, they have this pain of not having kids, and it just grows and grows, and it takes a deep root within them. Similar thing happens today. Sometimes I'll meet with a couple, and they just believe so strongly that they are meant to be parents. They got this desire within them for this passion to have a child. But as the years go by, no matter what they do or how hard they try, there's just no kid. And occasionally when I meet with couples like this, they'll get real honest with me. And they will just open up about the amount of pain they experience almost every day. I mean, every time they see one of their friends announce on social media, I'm pregnant. Or every time they're just in an everyday conversation and the parent that they're talking to is just complaining about how expensive kids are or how they got to drive their kids to soccer practice yet again. It's like, for these couples, it's like a twist of the knife in their hearts. Because they feel so strongly this desire, this promise that they believe God has given them to have a kid. And now what they're doing is they're living in the land between. They are experiencing the gap. This is Abram and this is Sarai. They are in a season of pain, of confusion, of hurt and despair. And I point this out because from here, this story is going to get really messy. It's going to get really complicated. I mean, none of the people in this story are heroes. And also, none of them are really villains. It's really just a story of hurt and broken and messy people. People just like you and people just like me. Verse 1 again, it says, now Sarai, Abram's wife, had borne him no children. But she had an Egyptian slave named Hagar. So she said to Abram, the Lord has kept me from having children. Go, sleep with my slave. Perhaps I can build a family through her. Okay. Now, what on earth is going on here? So, in the ancient world, this was actually a fairly common practice. Families of wealth and power who couldn't have children, to protect their futures, would often take a slave, and the man would sleep with the slave, and once the child was born, he or she would be taken from the mother and given to the wealthy family. Now, I want to be super clear on this. Now, notice, this is a decision Abram and Sarai make. God doesn't tell them to do this. This is Abram and Sarai's dumb decision. God had no part in it, right? Does that make sense? And I really actually appreciate this about the Bible. You see, the Bible allows us to look at people's greatest mistakes. And that's, in fact, what's happening right here. You see, Sarai she's functioning out of this immense hurt and pain. And so she makes a terrible decision. She goes to Abram and says, hey, I got a plan, sleep with my slave and have a child with her. Then we'll take the child and raise him as our own. And it's at that moment that we, the reader, we meet Hagar, who is described simply as an Egyptian slave, meaning she has no family. She has no friends, no education, no money. Even her name Hagar, it means to flee, which tells us that probably at a young age, she probably endured some sort of abuse or mistreatment, and as a result, she ran away, and she ended up as a slave, a person with no rights, no hope, no voice. You see, Hagar is a slave. Hagar is a nobody. And while many of us, we think of slavery as something that happened years and years ago, slavery still exists today. You know, the home that we are providing the resources for in Cambodia, what we've been talking about the last few weeks, one of the boys I met while I was there is a boy by the name of Christian. And his story is a lot like Hagar's story. He grew up in this really abusive household and ended up running away. And he ended up at a relative's house, and they, instead of taking care of him, they made him as their slave. And this is hard for many of us to imagine, but every day he had to wake up and he had to do all the chores, all the manual labor. He was treated less than human. And it led Christian to such a place of depression and hopelessness that he actually tried to end his life. Now, fortunately for him, he ended up in New Hope Home. But you see, his story is a lot like Hagar's story. And so you notice in the story, no one asks Hagar what she wants because no one cares. No one sees her. She's a nobody, a slave. Verse 4, we find Abram, he slept with Hagar, and she conceived. So what happens is Hagar gets pregnant, and then, no surprise, things go from bad to worse. Verse 4 continues. It says, when she, Hagar, knew that she was pregnant, she began to despise her mistress. Then Sarai said to Abram, she said, you are responsible for the wrong I am suffering. I put my slave in your arms, and now that she knows she is pregnant, she despises me. May the Lord judge between you and me. Your slave is in your hands, Abram said. Do with her whatever you think best. Then Sarai mistreated Hagar, so she fled from her. So Hagar gets pregnant. Sign of blessing back then. And the moment she does, the moment she gets any sort of influence, any sort of power, what does Hagar do? Exactly what has been done to her. You see, Hagar does what's been modeled to her. We even see it in this word despise. This word, it means literally to make small. The idea here is to try to hurt someone by making them feel like they don't matter, like they are less than. And why does Hagar do this to Sarai? Because people have been doing it to her for her entire life. This is what hurt people do, don't they? They hurt people. And we know this, don't we? For example, I was watching Toy Story 3 a while ago with my kids. And the main villain in Toy Story 3 is a toy by the name of Lotso. That's a great movie. I love the movie. But I didn't actually remember that the reason Lotso becomes a villain is because he has this tragic story in his past where he suffers this immense hurt. And he is betrayed. And so once Lotso gets any sort of power, he uses it to hurt and betray other people because that's all he knows. I mean, all of us have heard this before. Hurt people, hurt people. And that's exactly what's happening here. The very first time Hagar gets any sort of influence, she begins to do exactly what has been done to her. So now Sarai is hurt. She goes to Abram, who can't be bothered to help in this situation that he's created. He's passive and checked out, which is terrible and wrong. And so then Sarai retaliates against Hagar. She mistreats Hagar, which this word literally means to oppress and abuse. And it gets so bad that we find that when Sarai mistreated Hagar, she fled from her. I mean, these people are a mess, aren't they? And remember, this is the family God said, I choose you, I want to bless you, you will be a blessing. This means for us, if you are from a family that is a complete mess, and you feel like your life is a mess, you just need to know God can still use you because God is going to use this family. I mean, just look at Abram's family. And because Hagar is a slave, because she is seen as a nobody, look what happens to her. She is the one who suffers the worst. So she runs away. And so here we have this single pregnant woman with no money, no job, no education. She's out on the street. I mean, can you imagine how scared and how desperate she would be? No way to get help. No one to take care of her. Nothing she can do to help herself or her child. No one to protect her. No one to save her. Until verse 7. It says, the angel of the Lord found Hagar near a spring in the desert. All of a sudden, we meet this new character whose title is the angel of the Lord. Now, I got to be honest, I could nerd out on this for the rest of today, but I'm going to be brief. But in the Bible, the angel of the Lord always shows up at the most important moments in human history. For example, hundreds of years later, God's people are in slavery to the Egyptians and they cry out for help. And then God shows up as the angel of the Lord to a man named Moses. Exodus chapter 3, verse 2. We find there the angel of the Lord appeared to him in flames of fire from within a bush. See, the angel of the Lord gives Moses a mission. Go, save my people. And that's what Moses does. Or later on, God's people are again oppressed. The angel of the Lord shows up to the future parents of Samson. And here's what we find in Judges 13:3. It says, the angel of the Lord appeared to her, this is the wife, and said, you are barren and childless, but you are going to become pregnant and give birth to a son. See, this figure, the angel of the Lord, appears in these really big moments in human history. And on top of that, the angel of the Lord seems to always speak on behalf of God. But then he's also often referred to as God. So there's tons of scholars who have written on the topic of who is the angel of the Lord. I mean, who is this man who comes in times of great trouble? Who is this man that when God's people are hurting, he arrives to comfort them? Who is this man who, when people are desperate, he arrives with strength and compassion? Who is this man that has the power of God? And I'll give you my opinion that the angel of the Lord is actually Jesus. Now, that's just my opinion, but what we do know is that usually when the angel of the Lord shows up before some big battle or massive event, it's always the most important moments. Except for right here. Right here, the angel of the Lord shows up and he meets this young, broken, hurting, nobody, pregnant girl. A girl who has spent her whole life being overlooked, forgotten, mistreated, used, abused. And I point this out because today, if you feel like a nobody, if you feel like you don't matter, if you feel like your problems are your fault and no one is coming to help you, I just want you to know that you're the type of person God loves to show up for. That God shows up for us when we feel at our worst. And that's what happens with Hagar. The angel of the Lord found Hagar near a spring in the desert. It was the spring that is beside the road to Shur. And he said, Hagar, son of Sarai, where have you come from? And where are you going? And I love that the angel of the Lord begins with a question, because questions like this, they're an act of grace, aren't they? I mean, the angel, it could have shown up and said, Hagar, what is wrong with you? What have you done? You're so dumb. You put your life at risk and the baby's. This is all your fault. But that's not how God speaks. See, God, he shows up in gentleness and grace. He says, hey, Hagar, where are you going? And of course, we know, just like God knows, that Hagar has no plan. She has no place to go. She is all alone. And so the angel of the Lord responds to Hagar. He says, hey, I need you to go back for a little while, mostly because if you stay out here, you're going to die. And then the angel of the Lord gives Hagar this promise, verse 11. You will give birth to a son. You shall name him Ishmael, for the Lord has heard of your misery. See, God doesn't lie to Hagar next. God says, hey, the son is going to be a gift, but life is going to be tough for your son at times. His life is not going to be perfect. And that's true of all of us, isn't it? God doesn't promise his people an easy life. I mean, even Jesus said it this way. Jesus said, in this world you will have trouble. You will experience pain and loss and difficulty. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart, Jesus says. I have overcome the world. Jesus says, I have overcome. I am at work. I am moving. I see you. I am with you. I meet you in moments just like this. And this right here is what Hagar experiences. In her darkest moment, God shows up. God meets her. God promises to be with her. Verse 13, so Hagar, she gave this name to the Lord who spoke to her. You are the God who sees me. For she said, I have now seen the one who sees me. She gives this name to God. In Hebrew, it's literally El Roi, which means the God who sees. You see, in the Bible, Hagar is the only person to give God a name, which I think is awesome. She gives God the name of what she experienced. El Roi, you are the God who sees. And seeing changes everything. And let me just say, I hope you've had a moment where you've sensed, oh, God sees me. I mean, maybe it happened during a song. Maybe there were just some words in a worship song that were exactly what you needed to hear on a specific day. Or maybe today, as I read a verse, maybe you just found yourself in this story and you just needed to hear those words directly from God. Or maybe you have a moment in your past where you just felt down and out, where you felt all alone. But it was in that moment that God showed up for you. I mean, I've experienced this in my life from time to time. Some of you know parts of my story. Growing up, my mom was a teacher. She was raising 3 kids, and she didn't make much money. As all of you know, kids are expensive. And there were these times where my mom she couldn't afford groceries. But it was crazy because I remember this growing up. It was like every time we were out of money, every time we had nowhere else to turn, we were part of this like little church. And there would be this like quick knock on the door, and we'd open up the door and there would just be a bag of groceries on our front door. And I'll tell you, my mom, I don't think ever told the church that we didn't have much money or we needed groceries. But every single time we were desperate, someone provided. God used someone to give us exactly what we needed. El Roi, the God who sees. And so today, I just hope you know that you have a God who sees you. Wherever you find yourself, alone, tired, exhausted, you need to know God sees, God hears, God is at work. And I'll tell you, I believe today it's one of those moments where God sees and we're going to see God work. Today, we get a chance to continue to bless a group of boys in Cambodia. Many of you know this story, but some of you are new to our church. And many of the boys in this home we've been talking about the last few weeks, they grew up on the streets with no family, no friends, no community, no resources, no education, and most importantly, they had no hope. But God saw them. And I think God today is asking us to step in and be a blessing to help them. So over the last few weeks, one of the things we've done is we've shown all these videos and photos of these boys, and we've talked about the difference this home has made because seeing changes everything. You see, God saw their need, God sees them, and I believe today God has asked us as a church to step up and be a blessing to them. And so today is the day we've been looking forward to. And I know some of you, you're watching this online and you are ready to give generously. You have prepared, you have prayed about it, and I know that there are some of you that this is brand new, but God is going to prompt you now to just give generously from your heart because there is a group of kids in need. There is a group of kids who the world told every day, you're a nobody, you don't matter, you don't have any worth or value. But we have a God who sees. El Roi, a God who shows up. And so today I believe God's plan is to use us, people like you, and people like me. So today I want to unapologetically ask you to give sacrificially. And my hope and my prayer is that God will use us as a church to fund this home for another 2 full years, which just for the dollars is $130,000, which I know sounds like a lot until you realize that includes food, shelter, clothes, education, paying the staff, which, by the way, the mom and dad at this home, they are the absolute best. I mean, they love each one of these kids like crazy. So we got a big goal as a church this weekend, and we have a big God. Now I know some of you, just because I know some of you, you want to know, like, hey, Andrew, what happens if we get more than $130,000? Which I love that you're asking that, and let me just say that would be a great problem. But one of the things we've just committed to is every single dollar given on this weekend is going to go to serve vulnerable people outside of the walls of our church. So even if we exceed the 2 years, we have other great partners who are doing incredible work, and we want to bless them as well. But I'll tell you, to reach our goal, it's going to take everyone. So today, or over the last few weeks, if you've seen this need, or you feel this need today, you need to just know seeing changes everything. And so here you can see on this how you can give. But I just want to ask you, man, be part of blessing these kids. And I can tell you over the last week, God has been challenging me and my family on how we're going to give. And God has blessed us. And so now we know it's our turn to step up and be a blessing. So I want to say a huge thank you to those of you in advance who are choosing to give. But also second, I just want you to know, if you're watching today and maybe you're brand new to faith, I want you to know there is a God who sees you today. There is a God who cares. And there is a God who meets you in this space. Let's pray. God, we thank you. You are so good and so gracious to us. So I just pray in this moment that, God, you would remind us that we are seen, that we are valued, that we matter to you. And God, I pray the same thing would be true of the New Hope home in Cambodia, that each boy would know that they matter, that they are seen, and that they are loved. And so, God, move in us and move in our church today. We love you because you loved us first. It's in your Son's name we pray, God. Amen.